My fiancée left me for my brother on our wedding day with my parents' full support. Now she sought help against her husband's controlling behavior. The morning of what should have been the happiest day of my life started with my best man knocking on my hotel room door at 6 in the morning. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and running through my vows one more time. The butterflies in my stomach felt more like angry wasps, but I figured that was normal pre-wedding jitters. 3 years of planning had led to this moment, and everything was supposed to be perfect. I opened the door expecting to see my college buddy holding coffee and maybe some stupid joke about cold feet. Instead, his face was pale and he kept running his hands through his hair. He wouldn't meet my eyes when he told me I needed to call my mom immediately, something about the ceremony being postponed. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, and when she picked up, her voice sounded strained and weird. She told me to sit down before she continued talking. That should have been my first clue that my world was about to implode. She explained that my fiancé had something important to tell me and that the family had decided it would be better if I heard it from them first. The way she kept using the word family made my skin crawl, like they were all in on some secret that I wasn't part of. My younger brother had been acting strange for weeks leading up to the wedding. He kept making weird comments about whether I was really sure about getting married, asking if I thought my fiancé was truly happy. I brushed it off as him being protective or maybe jealous that I was settling down first. He had always been the wild one, the one who never held down a relationship for more than a couple months. I never imagined he was slowly working his way into mine. The phone call that changed everything came 2 hours before our ceremony was supposed to start. My fiancée's voice was barely above a whisper when she told me she couldn't go through with the wedding. Not because she was scared or having second thoughts about marriage, but because she had fallen in love with someone else. Someone who understood her better, who made her feel more alive, who shared her dreams in ways I apparently never could. When she said his name, the hotel room started spinning. My brother. My little brother who I had taught to ride a bike, who I had helped through his first heartbreak, who was supposed to be standing beside me as my groomsman in just a few hours. The same brother who had been coming around more often during our engagement, who had started showing up at our apartment with takeout and staying for dinner, who had volunteered to help with wedding planning when I was swamped with work. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was finding out that my parents had known for over a month. They had been having family meetings without me, discussing how to handle the situation, weighing their options like I was some kind of business problem that needed solving. My mom actually used the phrase damage control when she explained why they hadn't told me sooner. They were worried about deposits, about family drama, about what people would think. My dad got on the phone and tried to explain their reasoning. He said they hoped it was just a phase, that maybe my fiancée would work through her feelings and still go through with the wedding. They thought it was better to wait and see rather than destroy two relationships unnecessarily. The way he talked about it, like they were protecting everyone's best interests, made me feel completely hollow inside. I hung up and just sat there in my wedding suit, staring at myself in the hotel mirror. 300 guests were going to show up at the venue in a few hours expecting to see me get married. The caterers were probably already setting up, the florist was arranging centerpieces, and the photographer was getting ready to capture what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts from relatives asking if everything was okay, friends wanting to know if they should still come to the venue, vendors asking for last-minute confirmations. I turned it off and sat in complete silence for what felt like hours. Eventually, my best man came back with coffee and just sat with me while I tried to process what had happened. The next few weeks were a blur of canceled reservations, returned gifts, and awkward conversations with people who had no idea what to say. My brother and my former fiancé moved in together almost immediately, like they had been planning this transition for months, which I found out later they had been. My parents invited them over for Sunday dinner the week after what should have been my wedding, and when I didn't show up, my mom called to lecture me about being mature and accepting the situation. I couldn't stay in the same city anymore. Everything reminded me of the life I thought I was going to have. I found a new job across the country and packed up my apartment while my brother was at work. I left a note saying I needed space and time to figure things out, but honestly, I just wanted to disappear from their lives completely. The new city was overwhelming at first, but in a good way. Nobody knew my story or looked at me with pity in their eyes. I threw myself into work and slowly started building a social circle from scratch. It took almost 2 years before I could talk about what happened without feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach, even longer before I could consider dating again. I met someone eventually, a woman who had her own complicated past and understood what it felt like to have your trust shattered by people you loved. We took things incredibly slowly, which she appreciated because of her own history with relationships. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I started to feel like maybe I could have a normal life again. We had been together for about 8 months when I got a message from my former fiancé on social media. I almost deleted it without reading it, but something made me curious enough to open it. She was reaching out because she needed help, and apparently, I was the only person she could think of who might understand her situation. Marriage to my brother hadn't turned out the way she expected. The passionate, spontaneous guy who had swept her off her feet had become controlling and possessive once they were living together. He monitored her phone, questioned her about where she went and who she talked to, and had gradually isolated her from most of her friends. He had convinced her to quit her job so she could focus on their relationship, which left her financially dependent on him. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had left me because I was supposedly too stable, too predictable, too focused on building a secure future together. Now she was trapped with someone who used her impulsiveness against her, who had turned her desire for excitement into a cage of constant drama and conflict. She was scared to reach out to my parents because they had become so invested in making the relationship work after everything that happened. They kept talking about how happy they were that both their sons had found their soulmates, even though she tried to hint that things weren't as perfect as they appeared. My brother had gotten very good at putting on a show when family was around. Reading her messages brought back all the anger and hurt I thought I had worked through. Part of me wanted to tell her that she had made her choice and would have to live with the consequences. But another part of me recognized the desperation in her words, the same kind of trapped feeling I had experienced when I found out about their affair, but felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't respond right away. I talked it over with my current girlfriend, who had a surprisingly practical perspective on the whole situation. She pointed out that helping someone escape an abusive relationship didn't mean forgiving them for past betrayals. Those were two separate issues, and I could address them separately. After thinking about it for a few days, I decided to respond. Not because I wanted to rekindle anything with my former fiancée, and not because I had forgiven her and my brother for what they did, but because I remembered what it felt like to be isolated and confused, to feel like the people who were supposed to support you had their own agendas that didn't include your well-being. I connected her with some resources for people in controlling relationships, including a support group in her area and a legal aid organization that could help her understand her options. I also gave her the contact information for a friend of mine who had gone through something similar and had successfully rebuilt her life afterwards. The most important thing I told her was that she needed to start documenting everything, keeping records of controlling behavior, saving screenshots of messages, and creating a safety plan for if things escalated. I also suggested she start rebuilding her support network quietly, reaching out to old friends and maybe finding ways to become less financially dependent. What I didn't expect was for her to start updating me regularly on her progress. At first, it was just occasional messages thanking me for the resources or asking for advice about specific situations. But gradually, it became more frequent communication about her plans to leave, her fears about my brother's reaction, and her guilt about how everything had played out between all of us. These conversations were emotionally exhausting for me. Every message brought back memories of our relationship, both the good parts and the devastating end. My current girlfriend was incredibly patient about the whole situation, but I could tell it was putting strain on our relationship too. She never asked me to stop helping, but I could see the concern in her eyes when I would get tense after reading one of those messages. The breakthrough came when my former fiancée finally reached out to her own family, who had been kept at arm's length during her relationship with my brother. Her sister immediately drove across 3 states to help her pack up her belongings while my brother was at work. They moved her out in a single afternoon, leaving only a note explaining that she was safe but needed space. My brother's reaction was exactly what we had all expected. He called everyone in both families, demanding to know where she was and insisting that she was just having an episode and would come back once she calmed down. He showed up at her workplace, her parents' house, and even contacted some of her college friends trying to track her down. The desperation in his behavior was obvious to everyone except my parents, who kept making excuses for him. The situation got even more complicated when he started reaching out to me directly. His messages started out angry, accusing me of interfering in his marriage and trying to get revenge for what had happened at the wedding. But as days turned into weeks and she didn't come back, his tone shifted to pleading. He wanted me to convince her to give him another chance, to help him understand what he had done wrong, to mediate some kind of reconciliation. I realized that my brother genuinely didn't understand that his behavior had been controlling and harmful. In his mind, he had been protecting their relationship from outside influences, making sure she was completely committed to him the way he was to her. He saw his possessiveness as proof of his love, not as a form of manipulation. Having these conversations with him was like looking at a funhouse mirror version of myself. We had grown up in the same household, with the same parents, but somehow we had developed completely different ideas about what love and commitment looked like. I started to wonder if my parents' reaction to the whole wedding situation had been part of a larger pattern of prioritizing the appearance of family harmony over actually addressing problems. My former fiancée eventually moved to a different state to start over completely. She found a new job, made new friends, and slowly started dating again. We still exchanged messages occasionally, but less frequently as she built her new life. She thanked me multiple times for helping her when she had nowhere else to turn, and apologized again for the pain she had caused me years earlier. The most unexpected part of this whole experience was how it affected my relationship with my current girlfriend. Going through the process of helping someone escape a controlling relationship made both of us more aware of healthy relationship dynamics. We started having deeper conversations about boundaries, communication, and what it really meant to support each other's independence within a committed relationship. We also talked about forgiveness and whether it was something you did for the other person or for yourself. I realized that I had been carrying around anger and resentment that was affecting my ability to fully trust and connect with someone new. Not because I wanted to get back together with my former fiancé, but because I hadn't properly processed the betrayal and loss. My parents still don't understand why I moved away or why I maintain such limited contact with them. They see the whole situation as ancient history that everyone should just move past. They can't comprehend that their reaction during the crisis was just as hurtful as the original betrayal, maybe even more so because it showed me that their support was conditional and strategic rather than unconditional and protective. My brother eventually started dating someone new, and from what I hear through mutual friends, he seems to have learned something from the experience. But we haven't spoken directly since those desperate phone calls when his wife first left. There's too much history there, too many layers of hurt and disappointment that would take years to work through even if we both wanted to try. The strangest part about this whole saga is how it changed my perspective on loyalty and family obligations. I used to think that blood relationships meant you automatically owed people your forgiveness and support, regardless of how they treated you. Now I understand that real loyalty has to be mutual, and that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance from people who consistently make choices that harm you. Looking back on everything that happened, I don't regret helping my former fiancée escape her controlling marriage. It was the right thing to do from a human perspective, even though it meant reopening old wounds and complicating my current relationship. But I also don't regret maintaining boundaries with my family members who showed me that their version of love came with conditions I wasn't willing to accept. My current girlfriend and I got engaged last year, and we're planning a small ceremony with just close friends and her family. No drama, no complicated family dynamics, just two people who have chosen each other and want to celebrate that choice with people who genuinely support their happiness. It feels completely different from my first engagement, more grounded and authentic. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my family had handled things differently back then. If they had told me about the affair immediately, if they had supported me through the betrayal instead of trying to manage everyone's feelings, if they had prioritized honesty over avoiding conflict. But I've learned that you can't build a healthy future on hypotheticals about a painful past. The most important lesson from this whole experience is that you can't control other people's choices, but you can control how you respond to them. I chose to help someone who had hurt me because it aligned with my values, not because I expected anything in return. I chose to limit contact with family members who consistently prioritize their own comfort over my well-being. And I chose to build a new relationship based on mutual respect and honest communication, rather than trying to recreate something that had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. These days, I rarely think about the wedding that never happened or the family relationships that never recovered. Instead, I focus on the life I've built with someone who sees me clearly and chooses me consistently. It's not the story I thought I would be telling at this point in my life, but it's a better story than the one I was originally trying to write.